started here? So I have one question for all of you. Is Alma College under the influence? What do you think?
Well, we're about to find out. I'm Colin Silkwood. I'm a sophomore at Alma College and a new media studies major.
I'm Ted Webb. I'm a junior here. I'm also a new media studies major. And this project that we're going to talk to you about here is a project for our NMS 280 Advanced Documentary Film Workshop class. What we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a look at why we chose the topic that we did. Then we're going to look at the process of the editing from conception to final product. We're going to show you the film, and then we're going to take a look at the findings from the documentary. So we want to start out with why we found the topic pertinent. As a lot of you know, some of you are involved in Greek organizations on campus. A lot of you, are around, but there is alcohol use on campus. How much alcohol use is there? We weren't sure. That's what we wanted to find out. So there is a lot of social awareness of alcohol use on the Alma campus. And from talking to students and some faculty, some people think that there's kind of a problem with how much alcohol is being consumed on this campus. So we really wanted to take the step forward, find out through documentary form if it's a problem or not.
So a little bit more background on this topic. In early 2010, campus officials started to look at how alcohol was being used on the campus by the students in both the party setting, social setting, and maybe more of a private setting. So from there, we took it upon ourselves to find out if alcohol itself was really the source of the problem, or if it was how students were going about using it. We originally planned on calling this documentary The Hall of Shame, and it would have had a more lighthearted approach where we would have focused on maybe students' interesting stories about friends they had that were drunk or their drunk stories. And we're just going to kind of give it a more lighthearted approach and make it a more humorous documentary.
But, as always happens, your views that you come into the documentary with when you start usually never end up the same. We ran into an issue where we got down, we started shooting some interviews, and we're sitting there, tell us your drunk story. And they're like, I want to be serious. So we had the questions, they wanted to be super serious and not tell us the drunk stories. So we continued from that point and crafted our, we had a first draft of the questions that we had, and it included some, tell us some funny drunk stories that you have. And we eventually omitted those in the rest of our interviews because our first interviews started out being incredibly serious. And that's when we sort of felt that, our conception of the Hall of Shame was no longer.
So from there, we kind of started with a single question: is there a problem on the campus with alcohol use? And as Ted said, we based our questions around that because we kind of got different varying answers. We started conducting interviews with students and faculty members about what they thought the answer was, if it was a problem or not. And through these interviews, we kind of got different opinions on this. Some students and faculty thought that, alcohol wasn't the problem. Some students thought that alcohol was the problem. And so we kind of had this gray area in the middle. We also conducted the interviews in a personal one-on-one environment where Ted or myself would be behind the camera, and whoever wasn't would be asking the questions to the interviewee. We would have it in a room kind of shut off from everyone else with just the two of us and the interviewee, so that it could be more personal, and we felt that they could give a more truthful answer without the worry of being, having to lie, having to be biased because of other people around and hearing their answers.
And because we didn't want, people to be biased against other people or to a certain situation, or have students judged for their views on alcohol use, we decided to do the interviews anonymous. The way that we did this is in the room, we set up a chair, and behind that chair we had two lights shining on a white wall. And we shot the interview directly onto them so the student's in shadow. You cannot see the student's face. We also decided that we were going to pitch shift the student's voice. And because of all of this, when we show you the editing process, I will not be showing you any student interviews pre-pitch shifting due to the fact that we want to retain student anonymity. So I will be showing you faculty interviews during the editing process. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. What we did was we started with interviews, and we wanted to make sure that we had key administrative interviews. And two of the people that we really wanted to get were Dave Blanford and President Abernathy. They are sort of the figureheads of the college. And we kind of realized that we needed one more person from health and wellness. And talking with Ann Lambrick over there, they have a grant-funded prevention coordinator on campus this year to help with alcohol use after the 2010 core survey study. So there are administration interviews in here. We're going to show you President Abernathy's here. So we start with an interview.
College campus in the country has to address challenges for alcohol and drug use, and certainly we have some challenges ourselves, but we do know that Alma students drink less than most students nationally. We had a study last year that demonstrated, for example, that Alma students drink 4.1 drinks per week versus 5.2, which is the national average. We have a wellness center directed.
So as you see, we have just a straight answer from President Abernathy, and what we would do is that we would go in here and say we just want this beginning section of President Abernathy to be in the documentary.
Well, I think just about every college campus in the country has to address challenges for alcohol and drug use, and certainly we have some challenges ourselves.
So then we would just go in here, just cut that right there, and then we have our own little section of audio and video that we can place into our timeline. These are called timelines or sequences. They're called sequences in Adobe. The reason that we chose to go with the Adobe Creative Suite is we could go from Premiere Pro, which is the program that you see here, which is for video editing, and we could take all of our audio at the very end and just easily go in here and you can go to Edit, and edit in Adobe Audition, and it would take all of our audio so we can edit it directly without having to export it in a certain way. It would just take it directly into another program, and we could take it from that program right back into Premiere without having to have any hassle of exporting it a certain way. Another reason we did this is because you can do the same thing with Adobe After Effects, where you can take a composition from After Effects and put it directly into Premiere Pro without having to export it or render it for any reason. They work really well together. Adobe Creative Suite has done a good job of having continuity between their programs. What you see here in After Effects are what we call the lower thirds, which would go over the interviews with our key administrative staff. And they would, they say their name and their title at the college. This one is President Abernathy's. And as you can see, you'll see what these ink titles are. They show up in our titles throughout the documentary. So we wanted to tie that in with the rest of our documentary. So we have, the ink titles there, and we have our titles placed right over that. And actually, this entire thing is a little bit opaque, so that when you add, we just added a white shape layer to cover the person's body so you don't see their hand movements or anything like that. But over here underneath the name off to the side, you can sort of see a little bit of their background, which was an aesthetic choice on our part. But we can just pull all of that back into Premiere. On 3.9, we actually had somewhat of an edit here, which was close to about 12 minutes. And it was really rough. We had to sit there and look at it and figure out what we wanted to keep and what we didn't want to keep. There were a lot of sound issues that we hadn't cut down yet. There were a lot of ifs, ands, buts that we had to get rid of. And also it was incredibly long. Our key target in our class was a 5-minute documentary. We knew that from the beginning of the class. So we knew that 12 minutes was going to be way too long and none of you would want to sit here and watch it. So I'm not going to show you much of this because some of these voices are pitch shifted, but it gives you an idea that we just started with, a longer sequence compared to, what we have now. And this here also gives you a look at, we just took directly the titles from After Effects, and that's why they're purple here, because we haven't exported them into a movie format. So then we get into our current sequence for this project. This has our titles, titles are interviewees and subtitles, because when we pitch shifted the voices, we noticed that there was some trouble listening to the distinction from the students' voices. You couldn't really understand sometimes what they were saying, so we added the subtitles to make it a little bit easier. You will notice that there are no subtitles for President Abernathy, Dave Blanford, and Heather Cole, because you can understand what they're saying. You can see their interviews. They're not pitch shifted at all. Right here is an example of Dave Blanford in his interview with his lower third, and as you can see, it's not shadowed like our student interviews are. And if I go in here and hit this, you can actually see that we have quite a few audio tracks over here. We're going to have our main master audio right here, which is going to be all the pitch shifted vocals and all the music from audition put directly into Premiere. But we started with all of these songs and all of the vocal tracks here and composed them down to a single file in Audition and put it directly into Premiere. And with that being said, I want to go ahead and show you guys the 7-minute documentary. And then after that, we'll talk about our findings, some of the ethics and aesthetics that we faced during filming, and we'll answer any questions that you guys have.
Alma is such a small campus. Everybody knows everybody, which makes it feel like everybody is drinking. I do not feel that there's a problem on the campus with alcohol use.
There's this other part of me that really worries because of what I've seen before. It's really scary to want it as badly as I found myself doing sometimes.
There has been points where I've gotten that far, where I was thinking, how did I let myself get this bad? You know, am I okay?
To take 1,400 students and try to figure out how many containers of alcohol are consumed in a week. I think on average, what the students would tell you and where the truth is probably vastly different.
2,700 drinks at the most.
A fifth or two per person.
500 to 1,000 drinks, close to 2,000 drinks a week.
I think that number needs to be consulted through Mackenzie's and 7-Eleven.
What you find is that alcohol is the drug of choice on the college campus. I think any college or university you go to, alcohol is the drug of choice.
You'll always find some people who have enough to be social and have fun to drink, and then you have some people who are getting belligerently drunk and sick.
I've consumed alcohol to the point where I was unable to control my actions in a safe way.
Let's face it, here at Alma College, there's a lot of people that work really hard, and you have to do a lot of stuff you don't want to do.
There's times where I definitely could have been doing my homework and I went out instead. There's a difference between being a drunk and being drunk, and sometimes that line's really hard for me to see.
Just about every college campus in the country has to address challenges for alcohol and drug use, and certainly we have some challenges ourselves. But we do know that Alma students drink less than most students nationally.
The fraternity parties are clearly the social alcohol use scene at Alma.
I think the Greek housing is probably the safest place to drink on campus, especially during
open parties. I mean, part of it's due to the fact that the brothers living in the house are actually the ones liable if someone gets hurt.
Where we could do a better job is training sober security guards and training risk managers of what it means and maybe the signs of, hey, someone's too drunk to be in your house. Let's walk them home and get them in a safe environment where somebody can keep an eye on them.
If they're to the point where if they continue to be in that social situation where they're partying hard, drinking a lot, we, shoot point blank with them and say, hey, I think it's time that you go home. When people are struggling with alcohol consumption on campus, they have a bunch of different options for them. The first one and the easiest accessible is an RA. If they are uncomfortable dealing with the situation, then the student can always be referred to the Counseling, Health, and Wellness Center.
The goal of the Counseling and Wellness Center for someone who gets referred here for an alcohol problem is to help them build some skills and learn some new ideas, new practices to be able to help them decrease their level of drinking.
When I came to college, I had never really been exposed to drinking. So when I was first kind of surrounded by that culture, I was definitely really surprised, and I didn't really know a lot of the effects that it could have.
Alcohol education is important. Freshmen that come in should have to, during orientation week, go to an alcohol informational session.
I think what you do is you take a look at social norming, have a social norming campaign so that students understand how other Alma College students feel about alcohol and how they're using alcohol.
So students know that what the actual level of drinking is on campus rather than, thinking it's some inflated number. They're getting the more realistic information.
Key here is that student safety is first. That has to be our lens and the priority in all that we do.
I think the perception is out there that students drink a lot. I think the reality is that we have actually a lot of students who don't drink at all.
The problem implies that I feel like it's really serious and solutions need to be found immediately, and I don't think that's the case.
There's a lot of drinking here, but everyone looks out for each other. There's a support system here that you just don't get at a big university where, to the institution you're just a number. I think students just need to be aware that alcohol is not as big of a problem as the administration would like us to think. We're not known as a party school, and so I think that right there speaks volumes about the alcohol consumption on our campus.
Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! I declare a holiday. I won't be answering my cell. No emails or texts. No messages or telling. I leave the front door open for the people that I'm close to. Life's short. We trying to get down like we supposed to. Scratch out all your plans. You got nowhere else to be tonight. Give it just a minute and I promise you'll see I'm right. Tell your people where it's at. If they don't know, they're gonna find out. Forget about the past, cause in here there's only right now. We don't need the speakers on your stereo to dance to. We'll just stomp our feet and clap our hands if we have to. And if you fall, girl, I'll be the one to catch you. The beat is in your bones, you just gotta let it pass through. We don't need no choruses or words to write a song. I'll just tell you what I'm thinking and we both can sing along. And when you're lost, all you gotta do is find your way to my house. They won't be able to see us with the lights out. Come on! There's nothing left to do. Turn the lights out. Baby, what's wrong with you? Turn the lights out. All you gotta do is want a little bit more. Girls, just shut the door. Turn the lights out.
At this time, Colin and I do want to talk about a little bit of the aesthetics and the ethics that we faced while filming this, and then we're going to talk about the findings that we did have at the end of the film.
So aesthetic-wise, the art of aesthetics deals with kind of the stirring of emotions and the senses of the person involved with something. For example, it can be involved with music, physical art, a video such as this. With documentaries, we try to use many different elements to invoke the same feeling. The black and white vignette for the B-roll, which was the dramatizations, that kind of footage, we use that to kind of separate it from everything else so that people wouldn't have a hard time going, like, is this part of the documentary or is this, you know, something completely different? We separated it so that you could tell that this was a dramatization, this wasn't real people drinking. The music we licensed under the Creative Commons use, and for each separate part we had a track that we felt went very well with the section we were discussing. The topics and questions we used were thought-provoking for both the students, ourselves, and we hope for you as well. Hearing some of their answers, I mean, we have a list of questions that we used, and some of them were like, do you feel that there's a problem on the campus with alcohol use? One of them early on was, how many drinks do you think are consumed on the campus in a week? And that was the numbers, a fifth or two per person, close to 200 drinks at the most, that area, that was that question. And we thought the questions got very thought-provoking and emotional answers from our interviewees. We chose a topic that's easy to relate to because we're in college. Alcohol is a very prominent thing here, more so than in high school. Maybe not as much as in your adult life, but it's still there. We also used the lowered voice tones and the covering of who the people were to kind of keep the anonymity and raise the mystery of who it is. Not so that you want to think to yourself, oh, who is this person? So that you know this person has the experience that they're talking about. They're being truthful behind every word that they say. So again, aesthetics are important to documentaries because as creators, we find joy and fulfillment in seeing that our documentary had an effect, both emotionally and possibly sensually, on the viewer.
And on the subject of dramatizations, when we were sitting in class, we kind of had this issue. We had this topic, we had this audio, we had these great interviews. What are we going to use for our B-roll? So after talking to both of our professors and discussing it amongst ourselves, we decided to go with dramatizations. The dramatizations allowed us to craft the dramatizations to what's going on in the audio, but still be truthful. Which brings up another ethical issue that documentarians run into all the time is our audience has to assume that we're being truthful in our editing, in our filming, in anything that we do. One of them is what I showed at the beginning, cutting pieces of an interview up with President Abernathy. I could take words of what he said and craft my own interview to how I want it to say and put it in there. But it's our assumption and your assumption that we're being honest and truthful with you about not doing that. That what we have is exactly what they say or what they said in the context of the edit that's happening at that time. So you have to be careful about making sure that you don't take a person's interview out of context from the question that they answered and placing it somewhere else where it doesn't belong. And then anything else that you run into is, your B-roll specifically. Dramatizations allow you to craft something that may or may not have happened. But because we called them dramatizations at the beginning, you're not assuming right off the bat that these are actual events that happened, which allows us to avert away from having to go into drinking situations and where people are partying and having fun and be like, hey, can we film you guys drinking? A lot of you are underage, but we're going to film you anyways. You don't want to have to run into that issue and having to blur people's faces out, having to remove letters if they're Greek. So you have to be careful about going into situations like that and being honest about what you're doing. But we didn't have to because we did dramatizations. And one last thing that we want to touch on is they're in black and white. Because originally we had thought that we might go into fraternity houses and film in their houses, so we didn't want there to be any distinguishing color, or the walls in some houses are very distinguishable as to what fraternity it is. So it keeps the anonymity amongst the dramatization actors and locations in which they were filmed. So this has been a presentation on our documentary, Alma College Under the Influence. But you may have noticed at the very end of the credits, it was Alma College Under the Influence with a question mark. Our findings have been, through our interviews, that a lot of people think that there's a problem on campus. But is there really?
Many students and faculty asked us during this interview process if we were going to include any information about the recent change to the party policy because of the fire that happened at the beginning of the semester at the Tau Kappa Epsilon house. We did not include this information in the original documentary because we felt that that would give it the party approach, or the focus on the party, and that's not what we wanted to have the focus on. More of our findings were that the percent of Greek students on campus out of the entire student body is 23%. 18% of the male population, 26% of the female population, all involved in Greek life. And some of the party policy points that we found were that major events must be hosted by a third-party vendor for facility and beverage service, so that means fraternities can't have large events at their house anymore. Minor events must be scheduled 1 week in advance with the campus security. It must occur on Friday and or Saturday between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. With 40 or fewer guests. And another fraternity, or that could be another fraternity or sorority, and that number cannot exceed 70 people then. And guests must present an invitation, and their name must be matched to a corresponding guest list.
What's interesting about the number of students that are involved in Greek life on campus is that Greek life is where you see a lot of the alcohol use happening on this campus. You hear about it, oh hey, I went to so-and-so's house this weekend, there was a huge raging party, we had a lot of fun, we got really drunk. But Colin's already said that less than 30% of the campus is actually Greek. In the 2010 core survey, they came up with the statistics that on average, Greek consumption is about the same as the rest of the student body, which makes you think if Greek life has this huge raging drunk party every night, that they're the ones getting drunk all the time. But if their consumption's about the same as the rest of the student body, that leads us to the assumption that there's a small group on campus making a really loud noise, which influences the rest of the campus body to think that there's an alcohol problem on the campus. But through our interview process and talking to key administrative staff, we've really determined that the problem on campus is with binge drinking. There are students binge drinking a lot and having to go to the hospital, and solving that problem is where in lies the solution to everybody thinking that there's an alcohol problem on this campus. So we just want to leave you all with the question, is Alma College under the influence? And at this time, we'll open up to any questions that anybody may have.
You may not be able to tell us this information, but of the people that you interviewed, how many of them were Greek?
There were 14 people total that we interviewed. There were 3 people that were not included in the documentary due to edit cuts, and 3 of those people that were cut out of the final edit were not Greek. So, I mean, it was a fairly high percentage of Greek students that interviewed with us, but part of that's because everybody else didn't feel that there was a problem with alcohol on campus, so they didn't really feel the need to interview with us. Which, I mean, when we were putting feelers out there trying to get people to interview with us, all the Greek people were the people that were on board for this, that were like, alcohol's not a problem, let's show the campus it's true. And the people that aren't Greek kind of said, well, it's not as big of a problem, why should I interview? I mean, that's kind of the answers and responses that we got from people when asking them to interview. Answer your question.
Was there a fair number between guys interviewed and girls interviewed? And was there more of like a bias towards one or the other?
I think there was 1 extra male other than female. Yeah.
So you were talking about the ethical challenges that documentarians face. can you share with us possibly your greatest ethical challenge in terms of walking that line between your vision and wanting to maintain the integrity of actual interviews?
I think the biggest ethical issue comes with the pitch shifting of the voices. I mean, Colin, if you want to expand on your feelings about that.
Sorry. The way I see with the pitch shifting of the voice, it's still the same person talking. However, I feel that we are kind of destroying what made them the more personal side to it, because with the pitch shifting, maybe I was the only one who noticed, but everyone sounds the same when you pitch shift their voice. Everyone has the same tone, so it's like, I felt like we were kind of stealing their identity a bit, making them all just kind of one number. But at the same time, if we hadn't done that, it would have been very unfair. We would have had to only interview people who were of age, because we wouldn't have wanted anyone underage to, be given away who they were, and then be judged by their peers or the student body in general.
And on that, we had several interviewees that we asked a few questions, and there were some people that got emotional about answering. And with the pitch shifting, you don't hear a lot of that emotion in their voice. So it kind of steals away from our vision of having an emotional documentary where you can feel their emotion through their voice to, well, we have to pitch shift. Now it's one voice, one sound. So that's kind of that line that we have to walk about protecting anonymity and trying to maintain our vision of the final product.
When you guys went from, say, 14 minutes or 16 minutes to 5, what, if anything, did you lose that you really didn't want to lose?
We had one segment that had to be cut, and that was a segment on peer pressure, on whether or not people were peer pressured to drink. The findings were that a lot of people didn't feel peer pressure to drink, but inserting that, we tried to insert it in a different place in the documentary, and it kind of just took the flow and kicked it out the door. So we had to take that chunk through the advice of our professors and sitting there listening to it with and without it to kind of decide, well, it flows a lot better without that chunk. So that took, I think, 3 minutes off of it in and of itself. And then a lot of the other time that came out was students that reiterated what other students said. It was just reiteration of certain things, and then ifs, ands, buts, all the nonsensical words that we don't really need.
It's funny, the target time for the class was 5 minutes. We hit the 12-minute mark. Kind of worried because we weren't close to being finished. We were wondering if it was going to be any longer. Dropped it down to 6 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 again, and then we hit this time. So it changed drastically throughout every step.
Yeah, you learn not to get attached to a product until your professors say, all right, it's good. So don't get attached to your projects too easily. That's what we do.
This is sort of a question about editing choices. I'm sure that you didn't change anybody's original intent to what they were saying. My question is, it seemed to me in a general sense that people picked that were chosen to emphasize the bad things about alcohol, and people that have problems possibly verging on alcoholism with alcohol. A lot of these people seem to be illustrating that, and the dramatizations also illustrated the really bad things. I assume that a lot of the people you interviewed said things along the lines of, it's not that bad of a problem, not that many, like I only drink once every so often. I was wondering if you just included the most dramatic things, or what were the choices there?
For editing decisions like that, you're talking about possibly keeping some of the dull pieces that may be more informational, but with our target time of 5 minutes that we were trying to get to, inserting informational material that is there that students were telling us that, some people already know certain things about student life, already know certain things about counseling and wellness. But it also gives you guys more of a sensational feeling when watching the documentary if you're using the more dramatic pieces of the edit. Because if you're sitting there listening to an informational documentary, I mean, if you're going to watch an informational documentary, you're planning on it. But if you're going to watch a documentary, you kind of want to be enticed by what's happening on screen.
So the choice is to make it more sensational or intentional?
Right. President Abernathy.
Great job. I think you're addressing a really critical issue for us, and appreciate the way you approach this. I'm just curious, given that you concluded that binge drinking really is at the heart of the problem we do have. That is the problem. What ought our policies be? Have the changes we've made addressed that, or where would you go?
I think with President Abernathy to have the most loaded question of the bunch. I mean, if I were to change the policies, I would wait another year to do so. Because of the party policy changes that we now have, it would be interesting to see if the binge drinking happens more because people have to secretly drink either alone where there's no supervision or where there's not a party scene around them to control how much they're intaking socially. But it can also work the other way around. If there's not that social atmosphere there, then maybe like, well, I'm just going to kick back on the couch, watch a football game, and have a beer. So your numbers can go either way after spending a year looking to see if the party policy changes the alcohol intake at all.
Another thing I guess I could add to that is something we could add, and I believe they have decided to add, during orientation week, having an alcohol awareness seminar or session of sorts so that the incoming freshmen, instead of getting maybe the wrong idea from what they see, they kind of get an understanding of how alcohol is used on campus, how to drink responsibly when they're old enough, or, I hate to say it, even if they want to break the rule a bit, drink responsibly when they're underage. It's a problem that maybe we could work to prevent.
And on that topic, being an orientation committee member, I've already proposed a topic to Lori about even possibly showing this documentary and talking about the findings that we have and use some of the statistics from the social norming campaign so that when they get here, they know what's happening. And if they're underage and they're going to drink, you're not going to stop them. It's college. They have a dorm room. They can lock their door. And if they're smart about it, they'll be able to drink. But making sure that they're drinking safely and know the effects of alcohol when they first get here is probably key, because some students are going to come from a background where they've never had alcohol before, and they're going to end up with a roommate who wants them to drink. So they're going to get some of that peer pressure. They're going to want to go out to the parties and see what that's about. So educating them from the very beginning of their 4 years here, I think, is key as well.
Thank you all. And as you know, yes, we have every student coming in this fall will be required to take a program called You Chug online before they arrive at Alma. There's some attention and orientation as well.
Any other questions? All right, then we'd like to conclude our documentary panel, and we thank you all for coming.